One of the things that I enjoy about my Renault Zoe is that it's very quiet, and so I get a peaceful and relaxing journey wherever I go. However, for some people, the sound that a car makes is an important part of their driving experience. In this video, I want to discuss whether EVs are too quiet. In a car with an internal combustion engine, it is very difficult to completely mask the sound of the engine. Manufacturers have sought to tune the noise, either to make it quieter and less harsh, or to make a feature of it. And which of those they choose depends on the target audience for that car and what they think they will prefer. There is a subset of car drivers for whom the sound that a car makes is an integral part of the driving experience. These are usually what we might refer to as petrol heads. They are car enthusiasts. Usually they have, or aspire to have, something that is a bit more expensive than just the average runaround that a family might have. For this subset of people, the lack of sound in an EV is a significant negative. Well, this is not the only reason they swear they will never have an EV. It is a common theme amongst their desire to see the humble EV wiped from existence. There is a world in which we can have both. We need to reach net zero as fast as we can in order to help mitigate climate change. But as long as we can do that, we can keep some ICE cars. And one way to do this is with synthetic fuels. Synthetic fuels are created from raw materials, very simple raw materials, using electricity. And this usually involves creating hydrogen by electrolysis of water, and then something like carbon capture to create the CO2 and then combining them together. Unfortunately, cars that run on synthetic fuels will be very expensive to run. The fuel creation process is very inefficient, and the fuel burning process is also very inefficient in internal combustion engine cars. Inefficiency means that more energy is required at the input in order to get energy at the output. And in the future, energy equates to cost. Now, burning a fuel produces CO2, which is a huge problem in terms of climate change. Burning also produces nitrogen oxides, which we know are bad for human health. However, for cars that are rarely used, in other words, a small subset of the total fleet, doing very limited mileage each year, then the impact of those cars would be small. So there is a future in which EVs form the vast majority of our daily fleet and do the daily grind. Then classics and specialist cars remain in order to do very limited mileage running on synthetic fuels. The sound of classics is not something that will be lost, therefore, but will just be removed from our daily lives. With EVs, our daily grind, where we're sat in traffic so regularly, will be quieter and perhaps more relaxing. This most benefits the people who live near roads and motorways, but it actually benefits all of us in reality if we appreciate that quiet. What we will do is move the noise of internal combustion engines to places where people who enjoy that noise can do so without a problem. For example, at car events. Now, for the daily grind for the people who are petrol heads and who will miss the noise even on the daily grind, there is another solution, which is artificial noise. There are a few cars that have been released or demonstrated that generate artificial noises, for example, engine noises. These are the Dodge Charger Daytona SRT electric muscle car concept by Dodge, the Abarth 500e, which is an electric version, an upgraded version of the Fiat 500e, and the Hyundai Ioniq 5N. Top Gear recently released the first drive review of the upcoming Hyundai Ioniq 5N. This is a performance version of the well-respected Hyundai Ioniq 5 electric car and uses the famous N badge to indicate its performance heritage. The Ioniq 5N, it produces an artificial noise, one of several that you can choose from. And one section of the review that Top Gear have done is about how the N eShift feature and the associated noise that is generated while using it affects the fun of driving. Now, I wonder whether the noise is still slightly too artificial at this stage. That was certainly my thought as I watched that review. I'm not sure that the noises are yet perfect, but I welcome the generation of noises like this as options for those who want it, because I can't see a reason why we shouldn't have these options. It allows us to explore what it is that makes driving an engaging experience without necessarily generating CO2. Now, these noises, driving an electric car with artificial noises, will never be the same as an internal combustion engine car, and I'm not trying to pretend that it will be. But it is certainly hard to deny the reviewer's enjoyment of the car and how it is enhanced by these artificial features. You can watch that video. It will be linked on the end screen at the end of this one if you haven't already seen it, and see what you think about how the reviewer enjoys it and whether these artificial features are adding to his enjoyment. What I would say is I have two requests if we're going to add artificial noises to EVs. The first one is that you should be able to turn them off so that you only have them when you want them. And the second, I think, is that they should be internal to the car and not external. If the driver likes the noise, then the driver should get that noise without necessarily having to pollute the surrounding environment for people who do not feel the same way. Certainly the Abarth Electric 500e is a car which I am slightly critical of in the way that it generates its noises. Firstly, the noises do seem very artificial to me. However, I have only watched it on video. I've not actually seen it in person, and maybe it sounds much better in person than it did on those videos. But the other thing that seems odd is that the sound generator is outside of the car rather than inside the cabin. So it's a shame that it's not inside for the driver to hear rather than the rest of the world to have to hear if they don't necessarily want to. You see, there are some benefits to artificial noise. For the first time, we can have the noise inside the car without it being generated by something that can also be heard outside of the cabin. We can also have it only when we want it and not when we don't, by being able to switch it on and off. Is this perhaps the best of both worlds, at least to some extent? Now, my fear, of course, is that people won't necessarily try it. There are a lot of petrol heads who are totally convinced that EVs are awful and won't even give them a chance. I think that's a shame. By closing their minds, they might miss out on a new experience that is interesting alongside the experience they already have, if not better than it. Now, I respect the opinion of people who have tried things and didn't like them. But it's much more difficult to respect the opinion of people who speak with no experience and are therefore uninformed about the options. I wonder what proportion of people want the noise that cars create. My guess is that it's a fairly small minority. However, that minority is very vocal on forums and in the comments section of YouTube videos, and certainly I've had a couple of comments from that group. They seem to feel that they have the most to lose from a switch over to EVs, and certainly a switch over to EVs seems extremely likely at this point. The figures are showing that it is an exponential increase in the purchase of cars is switching over to EVs, so this seems extremely likely to me. I think there's a silent majority who don't necessarily want to be able to hear the noise of an engine. The noise of your average family car has been tweaked a lot to make it better than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. But that's not to say that it's particularly engaging or exciting. A basic Ford Focus isn't what excites the minority who like these noises, yet it is the significant proportion of the world's fleet just at the moment. So to what do you aspire? There are a lot of fantasy car garages full of muscle cars and supercars that would be very noisy. Yet when I think of a luxurious car that I might aspire to own, it would be one with very little noise. As an example, Rolls-Royce have spent millions, if not billions, reducing cabin noise, cocooning their drivers in quiet luxury. And certainly, whilst I wouldn't necessarily desperately want to own a Rolls-Royce, having driven an EV, that's certainly something that seems to appeal to me more. Now, I say that owning an EV is like owning a more expensive car than you can afford. Of course, they are expensive, and there is no doubting that. But that's not to say that they are not much more similar to internal combustion engine cars of old that were much more expensive still. The level of comfort and refinement that an EV can offer is like the luxury brands of old in the internal combustion engine space, and that's true for pretty much all EVs. However, the only way to find out for yourself is to experience it, and that's why I suggest you take the time to do so. If you can, try an EV and see how you feel about how it drives and how it sounds. I've created a video about how you might try an EV without spending a lot of money, and that will be linked to from the end screen of this video, as well as being listed in the description. You might want to watch that one to get some ideas of how you could try an EV without spending a lot of money. Well, that's it for another video. Thanks very much for joining me again. Your comments and questions are most welcome in the section below. I would love to hear what you think about this subject. If you have an EV and appreciate the quiet, then I'd love to hear you say so. If you don't have an EV and you're worried that they are too quiet, then that would also be an interesting thing to hear. Now, if you've liked the video, it would be a help to me if you click the thumbs up button. That tells YouTube that you've enjoyed it, and YouTube may promote it to other people who would also enjoy it. And of course, click subscribe if you want to see more. Thanks.